The Admiral Nakhimov, Russia's nuclear gamble at sea. Nearly 4 decades have passed since a catastrophic chain of explosions tore through the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Pripyat, a mere 65 miles from Kiev's heart. That April night in 1986 unleashed somewhere between 50 and 185 million curies of radioactive contamination across Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, and beyond into Europe's heartland. The human toll was staggering. Radiation exposure affected millions, forcing over 400,000 souls from their homes, their land rendered uninhabitable for generations. History remembers Chernobyl as humanity's darkest nuclear nightmare, an indelible scar on the Soviet Union's legacy. Yet today, the Russian Navy appears determined to dance with catastrophe once more. This time, the threat doesn't lurk within concrete reactor walls on land. It floats upon the ocean's surface, riding the waves with volatile nuclear power coursing through its veins. At the center of this unfolding drama sits the Admiral Nakhimov, a colossal nuclear-powered battlecruiser that has earned a chilling nickname among naval observers, a floating Chernobyl. The vessel's seaworthiness, or troubling lack thereof, combined with its inherently unstable power source, has raised alarm bells across the international community. After nearly 3 decades of repairs and upgrades, this behemoth has returned to active duty, promoted as Russia's next-generation naval superweapon and designated future flagship of the entire fleet. But beneath the propaganda and military fanfare, serious questions linger like storm clouds on the horizon. Is this vessel truly safe? Does it possess the combat capability Moscow claims? Or are we witnessing another maritime disaster waiting to unfold, a Chernobyl-scale catastrophe, only this time at sea? For the first time since 1997, this nuclear-powered Titan has returned to operational status under its own propulsion. 28 years of shipyard work at Sevmash and Severodvinsk have culminated in this moment. Earlier in 2025, the battlecruiser's twin nuclear reactors roared back to life, breathing atomic fire into 28,000 tons of Soviet-era steel and modern weaponry. The Admiral Nakhimov belongs to an exclusive club. Together with its sister ship, the Pyotr Veliky, named after Peter the Great, it represents the last survivors of the Kirov-class nuclear-powered guided missile cruisers. The Russians know them as Project 1144 Orlan-class vessels. These warships hold a unique distinction. They remain the heaviest and largest surface combat vessels actively deployed anywhere on Earth, second in sheer mass only to full-size aircraft carriers. When the first Kirov-class vessel appeared in 1979, it sent shockwaves through NATO naval planning. The threat was taken seriously enough that the United States recommissioned its legendary Iowa-class battleships in the 1980s as a direct countermeasure, yet for all their imposing presence, these Soviet giants never quite fulfilled their promise, never achieved their theoretical potential. The original plan called for 5 vessels. Only 4 reached completion, alongside one particularly ill-fated variant, the SSV-33 Ural, a command and intelligence ship built on the Kirov hull but cursed from conception. We'll explore that vessel's tragic story shortly. The lead ship, Kirov itself, began construction in March 1974 at Leningrad's Baltysky Naval Shipyard. Launched and commissioned in December 1980, NATO intelligence designated it Balcom Y, Baltic Combatant 1. But fate had darker plans for this pioneer. During only its second Mediterranean deployment in 1990, a reactor malfunction struck. With the Soviet Union crumbling politically and financially, repairs were deemed impossible. The vessel entered reserve status in 1992 under a new name, Admiral Ushakov. Hope flickered briefly in 2010 when Russian Naval Command announced ambitious restoration plans for all surviving Kirov-class ships. Perhaps the Admiral Ushakov would sail again. That dream died quickly. By 2012, assessments concluded the vessel had deteriorated beyond salvage. The final chapter came in 2021, scrapping. The second vessel, Admiral Lazarev, originally christened Frunze, joined the fleet in 1984. Its operational life proved even briefer. Inactive by 1994, formally decommissioned 5 years later, it too faced the scrapyard in 2021, with dismantling scheduled to conclude by the end of 2025. For both the Admiral Ushakov and Admiral Lazarev, the verdict was identical. Their reactor cores had degraded so severely that extracting spent nuclear fuel and conducting repairs would be prohibitively dangerous, complicated, and expensive. Better to cut losses and dismantle them properly than risk catastrophe. This brings us to the third Kirov-class vessel, our protagonist, originally named K. Alinen, when commissioned in 1988, it received its current designation Admiral Nakhimov in 1992 alongside its siblings, The fourth ship, initially called Yuri Andropov, finally entered service in 1998 after 12 years of construction delays. Renamed Pyotr Veliky in 1992, it currently serves as the Northern Fleet's flagship and remains operationally active. The fifth and final vessel never saw water. Plans called for it to be named Fleet Admiral of the Soviet Union Kuznetsov, then Dzerzhinsky, then October Revolution, and finally just Kuznetsov. None of it mattered. Construction delays plaguing the Pyotr Veliky project, combined with the Soviet Union's economic collapse, sealed its fate. The incomplete hull was scrapped in 1990. Before the program's cancellation, however, one particularly ambitious and disastrous variant emerged, the SSV-33 Ural. Whether poor engineering, manufacturing shortcuts, or simply rotten luck doomed this vessel remains debatable. Some might fancifully suggest it angered every sea deity simultaneously. Regardless, if any ship embodied the floating Chernobyl concept, this was it. Like today's relaunched Admiral Nakhimov, the Ural represented Russia's attempt to secure cutting-edge maritime superiority through nuclear power and advanced technology. The concept was audacious. Construct a massive nuclear-powered reconnaissance vessel specifically designed for extended intelligence-gathering missions thousands of miles from home. Its primary target? The American missile testing facility at Kwajalein Atoll, deep in the Pacific's most remote waters. The plan called for the Ural to station itself near Kwajalein for months, continuously intercepting electronic signals and gathering intelligence on America's most classified weapons systems. Construction commenced in 1989, and within 2 years the vessel was ready for its maiden voyage, a journey from its Baltic birthplace to Vladivostok on Russia's Pacific coast. The statistics were staggering. Nearly 900 feet long, 100 feet wide at maximum beam, displacing over 34,000 tons, the Ural was genuinely enormous. Operating it required a 1,000-person crew. Its twin nuclear reactors theoretically generated 171 megawatts, comparable to a small civilian power station. All that energy would propel the ship at 22 knots while simultaneously powering one of the densest, most sophisticated arrays of radar, radio, and electronic surveillance equipment ever assembled aboard a naval vessel. The Ural never reached Kwajalein. It never conducted a single intelligence mission. Soviet and later Russian authorities, wisely perhaps, refused to risk sending it on actual deployments. Fortune smiled on that decision, because from the moment the Ural entered service in December 1988, disaster followed it like a shadow. Problems began immediately, when the vessel finally limped into Vladivostok after an exhausting circumnavigation through European waters and Southeast Asia. Its dedicated pier remained incomplete. Forced to anchor in the bay, the ship began a prolonged struggle against corrosion and mechanical failures, with systems running continuously to support the massive crew stuck aboard. Summer 1990 brought fire. Flames ravaged significant portions of the vessel, leaving it charred and damaged. Then, autumn 1991 delivered a powerful storm that tore the still scorched hulk from its moorings, nearly smashing it and its radioactive reactors against a rocky island outcropping. Another narrow escape from nuclear catastrophe. The following year, while the incapacitated Ural sat pierside in Vladivostok, an ammunition depot a mile away accidentally detonated. The resulting explosion showered the naval base and docked vessels with ordnance and shrapnel. Somehow, the crew managed to move the ship to safety using only a single tugboat and the vessel's own failing power systems, yet another near-miss nuclear disaster. By then, the Soviet Union had collapsed, dragging Russia's shipbuilding industry down with it. Moscow couldn't afford routine training missions and deployments, let alone the millions required to repair the deteriorating Ural. As the ship wasted away in Vladivostok, it gradually took on water, developing a 5-degree list that multiple repair attempts failed to correct. Eventually, desperate dockworkers took an extreme measure. They physically welded the enormous vessel to the pier to prevent it from breaking free during another storm. The Ural wasn't just a nuclear accident waiting to happen. It was a hellish posting for its crew. Something aboard that ship, likely radiation, killed every rat during the maiden voyage so rapidly they didn't even abandon ship. Many crew members exposed to whatever eliminated those rodents drew their own conclusions. After enduring a year or two of uncomfortable, dangerous, and utterly pointless service aboard the doomed vessel and having transfer requests repeatedly denied, sailors took matters into their own hands. They jumped overboard and swam to shore. The Ural's crew strength plummeted from 1,000 to barely 100, a mere 10% of its intended complement, accelerating its descent into complete decay. In 2002, the Russian Navy officially decommissioned the Ural and spent nearly a decade determining how to dispose of it without exposing the numerous military secrets it contained. Finally, in 2010, it reached the Far East Zvezda shipyard for dismantling, a process that concluded in 2018. The world had one less potential Russian maritime nuclear disaster to worry about. But the Ural was far from unique in Russia's troubled nuclear naval history. During the Cold War, the United States and Soviet Union constructed over 400 nuclear-powered submarines. The Arctic port of Murmansk, situated just 60 miles from NATO Mies, Norway's border, became the Soviet nuclear navy and icebreaker fleet's home base, along with their intensely radioactive spent fuel. Only after the Iron Curtain's fall did the full consequences emerge. At Andreyeva Bay, 661,000 tons of contaminated water leaked into the Barents Sea from a nuclear storage pool in 1982. Spent fuel from more than 100 submarines sat partially stored in corroding canisters exposed to the elements. Fearing widespread contamination, Russia partnered with Western nations in an extensive cleanup operation. The effort decommissioned and dismantled 197 Soviet nuclear submarines, disposed of strontium batteries from 1,000 navigation beacons, and removed fuel and waste from Andreyeva Bay and 3 other hazardous coastal locations. Progress certainly, but incomplete. Significant amounts of Russian nuclear material remain scattered across the ocean floors awaiting cleanup. A 2019 feasibility study by an international nuclear safety consortium identified 18,000 radioactive objects in the Arctic Ocean alone, including 19 vessels and 14 reactors. While most objects' radiation has declined to near background levels thanks to accumulated silt, 1,000 still emit elevated penetrating gamma radiation. 90% of that concentrated in just 6 Russian objects, 2 nuclear submarines, 3 submarine reactor compartments, and the reactor section from the icebreaker Lenin. One particularly troubling wreck is the K-27, nicknamed the Golden Fish for its astronomical cost. This 360-foot attack submarine's experimental liquid metal-cooled reactors proved problematic from launch. One reactor ruptured, exposing 9 sailors to fatal radiation doses. Eventually, the Navy filled the reactor with asphalt and deliberately sank it east of Novaya Zemlya Island in merely 108 feet of water. Safety measures installed before scuttling were designed to prevent hull rupture until 2032, a deadline rapidly approaching. Even more concerning is the K-159, a 350-foot November-class attack submarine that sank without warning, sending 1,760 pounds of spent uranium fuel to the seafloor beneath busy fishing and shipping lanes just north of Murmansk. Thomas Nielsen, editor of the Barents Observer, described these submarines as Chernobyl in slow motion on the seabed. Russian state nuclear corporation Rosatom intends to raise these wrecks before 2035, as they successfully did with the top-tier attack submarine Kursk, which infamously sank with all 118 crew members in August 2000. However, no comparable underwater nuclear cleanup operation has ever been attempted, certainly not in the Arctic's icy, turbulent waters. The disaster potential remains dangerously high. Far from pausing its naval nuclear ambitions, Russia has accelerated them. Nuclear-powered icebreakers for Arctic operations continue under construction. In 2010, another vessel quickly earned the floating Chernobyl label, the Akademik Lomonosov. This unprecedented creation is literally a floating nuclear power plant, a non-self-propelled barge weighing 21,500 tons, equipped with 2 modified KL-T40S nuclear icebreaker reactors producing 70 megawatts of combined electrical power or 300 megawatts thermal. In September 2019, after a perilous 5,400-mile Arctic journey from St. Petersburg, it reached its permanent station in the Chukotka district, where it now supplies roughly 60% of regional power. Throughout that hazardous voyage, alarm bells rang loudly about potential disaster. Now, similar concerns surround the Admiral Nakhimov. Could this massive vessel, destined to become the Russian Navy's flagship, repeat the Ural's tragic pattern? To be fair, its nearly 3 decades of repairs and modernization have delivered significant upgrades in both offensive capability and safety features. Performance specifications are impressive. The ship reportedly achieves 31 to 32 knots with virtually unlimited nuclear-powered range and endurance of up to 60 days at sea. Crew complements range from 710 to 744 personnel with capacity to operate 3 helicopters, K-27, K-29, and K-31 variants. Like the Ural, exact specifications remain classified. However, reports indicate 10 universal vertical launchers have been installed, each housing 8 Kalibr NK or Oniks cruise missiles. Some accounts mention Zircon hypersonic missiles. Russian sources claim the final configuration may include up to 176 vertical launch cells, split between 80 anti-surface and 96 anti-air weapons. That's extraordinarily ambitious. For comparison, China's Type 55 super destroyer carries 112 vertical launch system cells. A Flight 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyer has 96 cells, while a Ticonderoga-class cruiser has 122. The U.S. Navy's cutting-edge Zumwalt-class stealth destroyers currently mount 80 cells. The Admiral Nakhimov reportedly received new radar systems and replaced its Soviet-era 130mm AK-130 dual-purpose gun with a more modern AK-192M weapon in the same caliber. Additional upgrades include layered air defense systems like Fort-M and Pantsir-M, together with Paket-NK and Otvet anti-submarine warfare systems. These enhancements complement existing capabilities to operate Ka-27 series helicopters from its hangar and flight deck, enabling coordinated long-range anti-submarine operations. Yet questions persist about which weapon systems and features were actually installed and how effectively they function. The summer 2025 relaunch came after countless delays and setbacks. The ship had been languishing in dry dock at Sevmash since last sailing in 1997, with serious work only beginning in 2014. Initial completion estimates targeted 2018, but that deadline repeatedly slipped, first to 2019, then 2020. By 2017, Russian news agency TASS reported completion should occur by 2021. In 2021, new reports pushed service re-entry to 2023. In 2022, Sevmash announced another delay to 2024. Finally, it's ready for sea trials. But what do these chronic delays signify? Did they allow installation of truly cutting-edge weaponry, creating a legitimate naval superweapon? Or do they indicate ongoing Ural-type problems, with nuclear disaster at sea or in port still looming overhead? Only time will reveal the truth. If the vessel carries all its purported weaponry, it would certainly project intimidating naval power. Yet Ukraine has demonstrated in the Black Sea, and to some extent the Houthis in the Red Sea, that in the age of attack UAVs, naval drones, and hypersonic missiles, even the most powerful ships face unprecedented vulnerability. Is any vessel truly secure and defendable anymore? At minimum, launching a new Russian nuclear-powered battleship likely means removing 2 other potential floating Chernobyls from service. Beyond leading to the Pyotr Veliky's eventual decommissioning, the Admiral Nakhimov's launch has given Russia justification to sideline its troubled, long-berthed aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov. Meanwhile, plans for a new class of nuclear-powered super-destroyers to replace the Admiral Kuznetsov have been shelved. Unlike the Admiral Nakhimov, the Pyotr Veliky underwent only minor modernization and still depends primarily on Soviet-era weapons and sensors. At one point, both battle cruisers were scheduled for the same comprehensive overhaul. However, those plans' status is now highly uncertain, with multiple reports indicating the Russian Navy will retire the Pyotr Veliky entirely. That's one less floating Chernobyl for the world to worry about, an undeniably positive development. If you found this deep dive into naval history and geopolitics compelling, make sure to subscribe to IntelX. We bring you the most important military and strategic intelligence from around the globe, cutting through the noise to deliver the stories that matter. Hit that subscribe button and stay informed with IntelX.